Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the ULIN Consulting Podcast. Let's talk everyday equity at the justice table, from add-on to all in. Of course, we're talking about equity that inspires change. And as you know, I am your host and founder and CEO of ULIN Consulting LLC and this podcast. And today we will be talking about, some very important information with amazing work coming from someone special here today. We're going to highlight the role of community partnerships and organizational equity, and thinking about equity doesn't stop at the workplace door. Communities hold wisdom we need to hear from and that support our organizational success. So today we will think about partnering as a part of our impact. So I want to introduce to you today Dr. Ranjanette O'Bannon, who is a clinical assistant faculty member at Georgia State University, where she focuses on integrating wellness and well-being into mental health and social work curricula, grounded in policy and leadership frameworks. She has previously held leadership roles at Spelman College and HBCU, where her work is strategic and curricular initiatives centered on equity, community partnerships, and institutional pathways. In addition, her academic work has led her to be the owner of a private practice providing online therapy and consultation, where she works with individuals and organizations around mental health, wellness, and leadership development. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. O'Bannon, and we are so happy to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and have this discussion.
Well, thank you. So we're going to dive right in. As we think about, organizations and workplaces, and we think about partnerships that they can have, can you share some examples or some thoughts about how organizations and partnerships with organizations that you've worked with might be beneficial to not only the staff who work there, but prospectively staff of color?
Yes, absolutely. So I want to start and just say that I think this is a really important conversation. Just recently, I was teaching a course that was really focused on policy and community building. And one of the very core ideologies or values that I wanted students to understand is that when we talk about communities in need or how we can support different communities in development, I really wanted to ground them in the idea that there is no othering, particularly in the state of affairs in which we are currently living. I think it's easy to see the work academically or the work professionally as task-centered, the things that we do for those. So I think it's first really important to make sure that we kind of ground ourselves in the idea that we are not othered. We are all very much in the same pot. We all, our families, our communities, all of the things that are valuable to us, we're all trying to figure out just how to move forward and have sustainability. So with that, I think over the years, what I have seen how corporations or community partners and other institutions work together and do it in a way that is authentic and sustainable is really to start there of identifying what is the purpose and who are the people. Why are we doing the things that we say that we want to do? And one of the ways that I found that people can really have use is to go back into the community, and go back could be the businesses that are already located in those communities, looking at both the higher ed institutions, talking to our legislators and our political advisors that are overseeing those districts, and starting there with some kind of a community conversation, a community advisory board. Years ago, when I was much younger and had to do this work, people thought this was an innovative idea. And for me, as a young professional, I was like, we're just talking to people, right? We're going into communities and we're building these advisory boards to get an idea of what is the value system, what are the needs of that particular community, and what are some blind spots that we as academics or researchers or even corporations that want to do well may not fully understand because it is not part of our full lived experience. So as we consider how do we co-create in partnership with these communities, no matter what that initiative might be looking at, whether that's workforce development, whether we're looking at providing services and programs into particular communities, starting with the community, bringing those key figures around, and also sometimes the figures in the community, folks that we don't think about. For an example, we used to work with the Block clubs. I know some people are, do they still have Block clubs? Yes, they do, right? The community folks who are living there, who are active in the community, those people came to our advisory boards, and not only did they give information about what they were seeing as residents of the community, people who were living and working in that area, but they also volunteered their time to the initiative to say, we can produce and give effort to this initiative. So you want to start there, bringing all of the key players, and not just the ones that immediately come to mind as those who are valuable, but all of those individuals who are relevant in the way that they care about the outcomes, they have effort, and they have other contributions that they want to give for the full development of sustainability, whether that is an wellness initiative, an academic development program, or some other kind of pipeline. We just want to start with the relationships, build the trust, and really be clear about what the challenges are and minimize the assumptions that we often make about people and communities.
I love that. And, you bring about a really big point, because as we start building these bridges of trust, and as we start creating and cultivating these spaces where we can co-create and think about things and not other people and bring them into the fold, you talk about wellness, and that is physical wellness, mental wellness. And of course, your expertise in that area, leads me to thinking about what components do you think that organizations need to have in place in order to cultivate places and spaces where, once we start bringing people in, individuals of color, communities that you're not necessarily connected to, what do you do once they get in? How do you create a space where they can thrive and where they can feel supported and safe and well?
Wow, that's a good question. I fundamentally believe that every organization should have an awareness at minimum, but most definitely training on trauma-informed approaches. Years ago, I am trained as a clinical social worker, and in the mental health psychology field, it was just a norm that, one, your clinicians would be trained in trauma-informed care, but then we understood that, oh yes, individuals at the front desk, your board of directors, your ED, everyone should have an understanding of how individualized harm and collective harm shows up in our communities and how they show up in individuals that we are serving. So I would say, really, excuse me, these kind of trainings and approaches are really important, because although sometimes corporations or different community partners have intentional goodwill of expanding opportunities, particularly to maybe communities and populations that they might see underrepresented in particular, domains or sectors of work, what happens is that, one, we don't have the actual resources, tangible resources, oftentimes for people to do the type of work that they want to do, whether that is between a mentor-mentee relationship or providing the structure of training and leadership development for people to really be successful in the work. But I think even before that part of it, the mindset about what is a trauma-informed approach in a workplace development arena. It is not about helping people deal with the most traumatic things that have ever happened. We're not talking about that. What it does mean is that we create workspaces that are meant to really build people up as individuals for the collective good of whatever the purposes of the work. And to also think about our policies. How do they hurt or harm the people that work for our company? Leadership development, or the lack of. We have great people who are committed to the work, but yet we have not given them the tools or the knowledge to be able to grow individually or to be able to capitalize on the strengths of their staff and to help them grow. So the trauma-informed approach looks at the individual, it looks at the company's mission and vision, and it looks at where do we want to go. And it comes up with a training that helps their executive board and their leaders and all the way down to the front desk person understand how to communicate in an effective way, understand their strengths and how they either help to bring forth the mission and the vision further, or how we use that and harm people. So an example would be recently I've been on this tour of going to different HBCUs and talking about a trauma-informed approach. And what I have found in the data, many of our institutions are saying that they are feeling trapped and challenged in some of these particular ways. One is that oftentimes leadership is not available to help support them because they may not understand that staff and faculty are under a lot of pressure. Because what we're not talking about is that, yes, we know that young people are coming to campuses with a lot more physical and mental health challenges, but yet the campuses and universities have not had more resources to be able to support them. So that means that the staff that you already had on board now have double or triple the responsibilities with no additional resources. So just kind of thinking about enrollment and thinking about who do we hire and how do we delegate tasks is a beginning way of thinking about a trauma-informed approach and how do you strategize and utilize those principles of well-being to support students, but also to support your faculty and staff in doing the work that we want them to do every day.
Wow, that's like let's drop the mic right there with that, because oftentimes people, and you say from the front desk down or from the front desk forward, you know, they're not informed about what a trauma-informed approach looks like. So you bring in individuals that are coming in from our HBCUs or our other organizations into the workplace, and then they're coming into environments that are not safe and well for them because the people who were there have no knowledge and awareness of how to truly support and respond to. And like you said, it doesn't have anything to do with knowing the person's personal experience. It's how do you connect with and be able to collaborate also with people who are not like you and who don't have the same lived experience that can also impact things. Yes, you were going to say. I think you were going to say.
Oh no, I am nodding in agreement because those things are very true. And I think that there are implicit bias, right? Like there's the implicit bias of who people are and what they should be able to do. But fundamentally, like if people come into an organization and at minimum, when they show up for work, they don't have an office, they don't have their computer ready, they don't have the fundamentals of doing the job. Already there is something that has been implicitly stated about your value and worth. So when we start there, and then in addition to the differences about lived experiences and the microaggressions that people experience and the biases around minority persons in workplace environments, all of those things begin to be a cultural buildup of trauma that feels invisible to most, but can be so detrimental to people who are of color or have a minoritized status that we see these increased requests for burnout or other mental health challenges where workers need to leave the workforce to come out to actually deal with some of the symptoms that have been triggered and activated by the actual work experience.
Nobody ever really thinks about that. Like, for example, you come into a workplace, as you say, you don't have an office, the computer's not ready, things are not set up for you. What does that say about your value to the space? But then you add to that, once you get into some of those environments and they're not psychologically safe for you, to a place where you can truly belong, be, and thrive, it makes it hard. So that goes back to like organizational partnerships, getting to connect with organizations in your surrounding surrounding communities that could help foster and build relationships to where there are ecosystems that are making pathways for people to be known, seen, acknowledged, and then you get to build relationships that are sustainable. What impact do you think that these partnerships can have on building and sustaining relationships with organizations to help foster a more inclusive and safe and thriving environment for those individuals that are coming in?
Oh, absolutely. I think the impact is very significant. So my significant other, he is an employee at a firm which has recently taken on the relationship of not only training and providing mentorship opportunities to two local HBCUs here in Atlanta, Georgia, but the company name is Sage. They've done a lot of work with Morehouse and Morehouse School of College and also Spelman College. But I wanted to use that as a reference point because one, there's many corporations that get involved to say, we're going to give some resources, some dollars to this particular school. But what this company has done really well is that they have made a commitment about not only joining an initiative, but hearing what the students needed, hearing from the workplace, and then saying, we're going to kind of develop these micro credentials, these trainings where these students will have immediate access to people in the field who are already known experts, have training and micro credentials in addition to their degree requirements that immediately address and talk to the gaps that the field is seeing and experiencing. So I think it's like that deep rooted understanding and commitment to say, we want to have an equitable experience from beginning to end. As we create the program, we want to make sure that voice is given from students, community, and the academics. And as we move forward, we want to make sure that there's still a partnership that benefits everyone, right? Not just the corporation, but who gets the benefit and who gets to decide if the reward is actually beneficial. So I think when we consider structures, that is, I think, one of the high tier opportunities for interventions and collaborations within communities. But at Georgia State, the role that I've recently taken on, one of the goals that I have is we are looking at building curriculum that is tied to both policy. How do policies that these students are going to be interacting with in our communities, how do they understand policy? Can they interpret the policy? Do they understand what advocacy is and how do you do it? And then tying that into an actual practice piece. And the practice has to happen in the community. So we are working with our community non-for-profit partners to understand what are some of the challenges in the community and how do we use our students within a practicum experience where they're not just bodies, helping the organization, but there's a true reciprocal relationship of beneficial response that the students are receiving. So looking at that, what I'm finding, again, going back to the advisory board, having community partners, students and faculty talk about what went well, what are some of the challenges, how are things changing in the workforce, in creating the curriculum, the courses, and the class experience that's not just theory, but is able to take the theory and understanding to shape and really polish students and prepare them to be in these leadership seats. But they need to have the experience in the community, in the active learning, and they also need the commitment that is long-term to say, whether it is a financial commitment or the resource of our expertise, and that faculty who are really committed to continuously challenging the outline of their curriculum that they give forth to students, that we are working together to make sure that we're evolving and preparing students who are ready for the next level of leadership in their communities.
Wow. Let me tell you, you have shared so much with us today, Dr. Obed, and I appreciate everything that you have shared to think about those ecosystems, think about those pathways for our organizations to connect with HBCUs and other local organizations to make and create those spaces where we are creating micro credentials so those individuals coming out of some of the organizations have some of those tools, techniques, and access to leaders to help develop them in ways to where they feel truly connected and are seen by the company as a value and not just an add-on in any way. And so I want to personally thank you so much for joining me today and providing your expertise. And is there anything that I have not asked that you'd like to share before we end our segment today?
I think the only thing that I would want to add is just to remind people that when we're thinking about community partnership, let's not wait for a crisis. A community partnership is ongoing, is relational. These are intimate experiences of being, of learning and growing. So get out there, meet with the people in your community, business owners, your political officials, your neighbors, and begin to just continuously have these conversations. Do not wait for a crisis. Let's be proactive in building relationships.
Dr. O'Bannon, thank you so much. And listeners, I want you to think about engagement not being an extract. Let's build relationships where community voices can lead and community voices can be heard. And then also think about when communities thrive, organizations also thrive. Thank you, Dr. O'Bannon, for being here with us today. And thank you, listeners, for another chat on Let's Talk Everyday Equity at the Justice Table.